Mr. Speaker, you're live.
Thank you. The Wyoming House of Representatives will please come to order. Welcome, members, to the 12th day of your 66th legislature, March 3rd, 2021. Chief Clerk, let's call the roll.
Convening roll call for the 12th day, March 3rd, 2021. Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Clifford. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hunt. Jennings. Kenner.
Here.
Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. McGuire. Martinez. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood.
Here.
Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar.
Present.
Sweeney. Walters. Washut. Western. Wharf. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker.
Here.
Greer.
Chief Clerk, it appears we have some committees that are still straggling in, so let's just leave the roll open. Members, if you'll join the Reverend Bob Thompson, who's here with us today from First Presbyterian Church for our prayer.
Good morning. Hear these words from Psalm 107. Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. God's steadfast love endures forever. Faithful God, we praise you that you have brought us to this new day, brightening our lives with the dawn of promise and hope. We thank you, God, for the warmth of sunlight, for snow and rain that refreshes the earth, for the beauty of your creation, and for the cool of the night that brings rest. God, as we begin our work today, we realize we are halfway through the week. A lot of work has been done, yet we have so much still to do. Thank you for your faithful presence along the way. Give us your strength to continue the good work that is set before us. Guide us each step of the way by your heavenly light. Gracious Lord, the psalmist today reminds us that your steadfast love endures forever. Thank you for loving us, God, and teaching us what it means to love one another. In Scripture, you have called us your beloved, and you call us to live in relationship with you. You have also challenged us to love our neighbor as ourselves. Empower us through your Holy Spirit to clothe ourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, patience, and love. God, I lift up to you the work being done in this House of Representatives. You have called each person here for a purpose, and laid on their heart the desire to speak for their community and for Wyoming. As they make decisions for this great state, they face a daunting task to discern how the bills placed before them will impact the future of this state and the families in their communities. I pray that your spirit be with them. Give them wisdom and foresight for the overtures that are before them. As they vote, may your spirit guide them in what is best for the people, and may your will be made known. I also pray for the people who are impacted by the decisions that they make here. We pray that this work bring peace, prosperity, and wholeness to our communities. God, I pray for this governing body and for each representative. As they work today, give them grace to face the challenges, creativity to find solutions, and understanding for one another. Guide them by your Holy Spirit in everything they do. And I pray this in Christ's name. Amen.
Thank you. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag. Thank you, Reverend. We appreciate you being here, offering those good words. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a full day ahead. As I outlined yesterday, we're going to read in and introduce a bunch more bills, standing committee reports, second, third reading, and then a rules. We get through all of that. Hopefully we'll have another more robust day of committee of the whole, maybe move a few more bills into our process. So Chief Clerk, Journal Committee report, please.
Your Journal Committee reports that the Journal of March 2nd, 2021 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Representative Haroldson.
Members, as you just saw, the Director of ILSO reminding me to remind you that noon is the cutoff for your bills. So please respond in the 3 appropriate ways to do that if you want your bills to be considered for introduction to this body and to our legislative process. Chief Clerk, let's go ahead and close out the roll, if we would, please. I think I got some of our members back in.
Burkhart,
Excused.
excused.
Oh, 2.
Burkhart. Crago,
Excused.
Duncan. Larson Dan,
Excused.
Oakley,
Excused.
Olson,
Excused.
Provenza,
Excused.
Stith,
Excused.
Washit,
Excused.
Williams,
Excused.
Yin,
Excused.
Zawanitzer.
Excused.
We have 50 present, 10 are excused.
Thank you very much. So members, that is one entire committee. And I guess I didn't realize that as the committee memberships have changed since last year. I don't click some of the names as I'm going through the roll. So my apologies. We'd have left it open a little longer. I want to assure the public and assure my colleagues on the floor that they're still at work. They're still doing their duties. They're just not here on the floor. But we have ample folks here to do our work. So we'll continue with our work and with introduction and reading and referencing of bills. Reading Clerk. With that order of introduction of bills, first bill for consideration, House Bill 116.
House Bill 116. Concealed carry.
Let's see, sponsored by? Sorry, I'm following my script, Reading Clerk.
Okay. House Bill 116, sponsored by Representative Wharf.
First reading of the bill.
Concealed carry.
Next bill for our consideration, House Bill 138.
House Bill.
I'm sorry. House Bill 116 is referred to Committee Number 1, Judiciary. I'll get on my script. My apologies. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 138.
House Bill 138, sponsored by Representative Schwartz.
First reading of the bill.
Tax on unearned income.
House Bill 138 is referred to Committee Number 3, Revenue. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 176.
House Bill 176, sponsored by Representative Henderson.
First reading of the bill.
Digital streaming tax.
House Bill 176 is referred to Committee Number 3, Revenue. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 180.
House Bill 180, sponsored by Representative Yin.
First reading of the bill.
Property tax deferrals.
House Bill 180 is referred to Committee Number 3, Revenue. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 181.
House Bill 181, sponsored by Representative Yin.
First reading of the bill.
Specific purpose excise tax revising.
House Bill 181 is referred to Committee Number 3, Revenue. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 147.
House Bill 147, sponsored by Representative Portner.
First reading of the bill.
Education expenses.
House Bill 147 is referred to Committee Number 4, Education. Next bill for our consideration should be 157.
House Bill 157, sponsored by Representative Harshman.
First reading of the bill.
Healthcare Professional Education Endowment.
House Bill 157 is referred to Committee Number 4, Education. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 177.
House Bill 177, sponsored by Representative Haroldson.
First reading of the bill.
Education, Understanding Federal and State Government.
House Bill 177 is referred to Committee Number 4, Education. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 184.
House Bill 184, sponsored by Representative Connolly.
First reading of the bill.
School Finance Funding Model Revisions.
House Bill 184 is referred to Committee Number 4, Education. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 98.
House Bill 98, sponsored by Representative Gray.
First reading of the bill.
Public Health Orders Reforms.
House Bill 98 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. Next bill for our consideration, House Bill 113.
House Bill 113, sponsored by Representative Harshman.
First reading of the bill.
Public Health Orders Limitations.
House Bill 113 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. Next bill for our consideration, House Bill 127.
House Bill 127, sponsored by Speaker Barlow.
First reading of the bill.
Public Health Amendments.
House Bill 127 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 156.
House Bill 156, sponsored by Representative Sherwood.
First reading of the bill.
24-hour wine permits.
House Bill 156 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 159.
House Bill 159, sponsored by Representative Duncan.
First reading of the bill.
Liquor Manufacturer Regulations.
House Bill 159 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 163.
House Bill 163, sponsored by Representative McGuire.
First reading of the bill.
Federal Congressional Elections Residency.
House Bill 163 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 169.
House Bill 169, sponsored by Representative Connolly.
First reading of the bill.
Alcoholic liquors markup amount.
House Bill 169 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 179.
House Bill 179, sponsored by Representative Zwanitzer.
First reading of the bill.
Optional municipal tax election.
House Bill 179 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 185.
House Bill 185, sponsored by Representative Duncan.
First reading of the bill.
Wine assessment on direct sales and shipment.
House Bill 185 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 187.
House Bill 187, sponsored by Representative Hunt.
First reading of the bill.
Elected official residency requirement.
House Bill 187 is referred to Committee Number 7, Corporations. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 149.
House Bill 149, sponsored by Appropriations.
First reading of the bill.
Veterans Property Tax Exemption.
House Bill 149 is referred to Committee Number 8, Transportation. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 172.
House Bill 172, sponsored by Appropriations.
First reading of the bill.
Veterans Property Tax Exemption Amendments.
House Bill 172 is referred to Committee Number 8, Transportation. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 186.
House Bill 186, sponsored by Representative Andrew.
First reading of the bill.
Automated Traffic Law Enforcement Prohibition.
House Bill 186 is referred to Committee Number 8, Transportation. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 155.
House Bill 155, sponsored by Representative Gray.
First reading of the bill.
Electric generation, reliability, and liability.
House Bill 155 is referred to Committee Number 9, Minerals. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 166.
House Bill 166, sponsored by Representative Harshman.
First reading of the bill.
Utilities, presumption against early facility retirements.
House Bill 166 is referred to Committee Number 9, Minerals. I think that clears your desk, reading clerk. Thank you very much. Next order of business is reports from standing committees. Chairman, if you know you have a re-referral coming, I'd like you to have those prepared as well. Reports from standing committees, reading clerk.
Mr. Speaker, your committee number 1, Judiciary, to whom was referred House Bill 85, unlawful dissemination of an intimate image, respectfully reports same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Crago, Larson Dan, Oakley, Olson, Rodriguez Williams, Washit, Yin, Zwanitzer. Noes, Representative Provenza. Representative Olson, Chairman. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 10, COVID-19 Large Business Relief Program, respectfully reports same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Kinner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred House Bill 76, Uniform Statewide Payment Processing, respectfully reports same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Kinner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. Mr. Speaker, your committee.
So members, there's a lot of noise and that's being picked up for the rest of the world too. So if you have a conversation you need to carry on, please do so, but please step into the hallway. Thank you. Please proceed.
Mr. Speaker, your committee number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred House Bill 51, Meat Processing Programs, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Blackburn, Clausen, Eklund, Fortner, Heiner, Larson Dan, Western, Wharf, Winter. Representative Eklund, Chairman.
Thank you very much. So remember, reminder again about the bill cutoff, noon today. And so please take care of those things. Also, if you have rules that you are interested in the body considering, as we adopt our final rules or our permanent rules of the 66th Wyoming House of Representatives, please have those turned in and available. We'll do those upon the completion of third reading. So with that, we are on bills on second reading.
Now, right here.
The first bill for our consideration is House Bill 38. First bill for our consideration is House Bill 38.
House Bill 38, Community Behavioral Health Priority Populations. An act relating to public health and safety.
House Bill 38, having been read 2 separate times, the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection is so ordered. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 39.
Optometrist Practice Amendments, an act relating to optometry.
House Bill 39, having been read two separate times. The question is, shall the bill be read?
Let me object to that because I have a second reading amendment, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, well, it's not available to the chairman yet, so and nor is it with the chief clerk. So we'll get that sorted out. So just stand at ease just for a moment. Thank you, Chairman Zwanitzer. So House Bill 39, we do have an amendment. And with that, Chairman Zwanitzer, my apologies. Sometimes the computers are ahead of the paper copies. And of course, the chief clerk, just so the members know, relies on paper for the official bill jacket. So Chairman Zwanitzer, please proceed and thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to move second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 39 and ask for its favorable introduction. You'll see this as a continuation of the conversation we had yesterday on Committee of the Whole regarding the Optometry Practice Act, where I did bring up some concerns with the language being, let's say, a little too broad on any type of laser procedure that may be, developed or brought into the states in the future. And so what the amendment does is say, after procedure, you'll see we're inserting the language as set forth by the board's rules. And so this would let the Board of Optometry then decide which type of laser procedures not otherwise prohibited in the bill or in the Practice Act are to be allowed at throughout Wyoming. And then an optometrist could come before the board and say, we'd like agreement to be able to take on this type of technology or this type of endeavor or procedure. So it addresses primarily my concerns about being too broad. It now at least allows the optometry board to decide what laser procedures would be available, and it helps the bill out. So I would ask for your favorable agreement in putting it in.
Thank you very much. Any other member for the first time? Majority Floor Leader Summers.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Honored and supported the amendment. I think it's a good compromise, and I'm glad the good representative caught that. I think it's a perfectly reasonable amendment.
We all appreciate perfectly reasonable. Any other member for their first time? First time? Second time? All those in favor of second reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 39, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Thank you. The amendment has been adopted. House Bill 39, having been read 2 separate times. Question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Hearing no objection, it is so ordered. Proceeding now to third reading. And members, as I mentioned yesterday, the yellow sheets are available to you. They're not going to be deposited in your individual mailboxes. On the east side is that doorway behind the good Representative Hunt. There's a credenza, or whatever those fancy terms for furniture are, a piece of furniture, and there's 2 piles of papers there. One is bills in committees, and the other is our yellow sheet, which is the things that are on the floor. So we're now on that order of bills on third reading consent list. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move the consent list consisting of the following bills: House Bill 21, House Bill 41, House Bill 43, House Bill 69, House Bill 86, and House Bill 107.
Would any member like to remove any of the bills off the consent list just provided by the Majority Floor Leader from the consent list? Any member like to remove a bill? I'll confirm the bills are 21, 41, 43, 69, 86, and 107. Seeing none, reading clerk, please read the bills on the consent list.
House Bill 21, sponsored by Transportation, Wyoming National Guard Preference for Education, an act relating to Defense Forces and Affairs, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. House Bill 41, sponsored by Blockchain. Interstate crowdfunding exemptions amendments, an act relating to interstate crowdfunding being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. House Bill 43, sponsored by Blockchain, digital assets amendments, an act relating to digital assets being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. House Bill 69, sponsored by Representative Greer, division of banking fees, an act relating to banking and commerce being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. House Bill 86, sponsored by Representative Newsom, off-road recreational vehicles registration authorized, an act relating to motor vehicles be it enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming. House Bill 107, sponsored by Representative Henderson, retirement system efficient disbursement method, an act relating to state retirement system, be it enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
Thank you, members. And since this is our first third reading back in a regular session, in our session, I'll just remind you, consent list, generally the practice is to vote aye, and then the chief clerk will walk through each bill, and anybody who would like to change their vote may do so. So with that, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bills pass the House? Chief clerk, please call the roll.
Roll call on the consent list. Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Clifford. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hunt. Jennings. Kenner.
Aye.
Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. McGuire. Martinez. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Simpson. Summers. Stiff. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Wharf. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. We have 60 aye. As for House Bill 21, are there any changes? Larson Lloyd, aye to no. Further changes? Further changes. Closing vote. Vote is closed. 59 aye, 1 no. As for House Bill 41, are there any changes? Larson Dan, aye to no. Fortner, aye to no. Summers, aye to no. Further changes? Stivar, aye to no. Further changes?
Chief clerk.
You need to stand. Ottman, aye to no.
Chief clerk.
Or Mr. Speaker, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Wharf? Wharf, are you changing your vote? Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 54 aye, 6 no. As for House Bill 43, are there any changes? Larson Dan, aye to no. Stivar, aye to no. Fortner, aye to no. Jennings, aye to no. Burt, aye to no. Haroldson, I to know. Bear, I to know. Ottman, I to know. Worf, I to know. Heiner, I to know. Nyman, I to know. Winter, I to know. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 48 aye, 12 no. As for House Bill 69, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 60 aye. As for House Bill 86, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote is closed. 60 aye. And as for House Bill 107, are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 60 aye.
Having seen the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bills 121, 41, 43, House Bills 69, 86, and 107 have passed the House. We're now in that order of business on bills on third and regular list. The first bill for our consideration. Sorry, we're shuffling papers up front. The first bill for our consideration is House Bill 7.
House Bill 7, sponsored by Minerals, Air Ambulance Membership Organizations, an act relating to insurance being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We do have amendments. The first amendment is Representative Bear. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, or Mr. Speaker. To the body, this is an amendment that was supposed to be part of the original committee amendment, and it was just missed. So all we're doing here is adding language that is consumer protections. And this was brought by an agency that, a stakeholder that was looking out for our elderly people that has the 4 initials beginning with AA. And this is just an effort to keep these corporations from getting too aggressive with people that might already have memberships paid for through Medicaid, and making sure that they're aware that there might be some financial responsibility if the particular carrier that comes to pick them up in an emergency is not the one that they bought a membership with. With that,
Representative
I'll stand for
Bear,
questions.
would you move the motion? Would you move the amendment too, please?
I move that the amendment number 1 to House Bill number 7.
Perfect. Third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 7. Thank you very much. Appreciate the explanation. Any member for their first time on third reading discussion of this amendment? I think I saw someone coming toward the mic. I'm just going to verify they had to go around the podium. There is a question in the back. Representative Craigo, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm just curious whether we're duplicating language that's, and unless I missed it, if it maybe was already taken out in the standing committee amendment, but on line 14 through line 21 on page 20, it already talks about language that's very similar to the proposed third reading amendment. And I just want to make sure we're not duplicating language within the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Any member for their first time? Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In somewhat we are, because I would agree that the reading of the earlier language makes that clear. But what was asked for by an organization that represents elderly people is that we go ahead and restate that and make it crystal clear that they'll make that disclosure. And that's why the amendment was here. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman Greer. Any other member for their first time? Any member for their first time? Second time? Second time. Members, we're voting on third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 7. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment has been adopted. We have a second, another amendment. Representative Vice Chairman Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to move third reading amendment number 2 to House Bill number 7.
Please proceed.
Thank you. This basically, all it is we are just doing a technical correction that we discovered.
Any discussion on the amendment? Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of third reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 7, please signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment has been adopted. House Bill 7, having been read three separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass the House? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Clifford. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hunt. Jennings. Kenner.
Aye.
Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. McGuire. Martinez. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood.
Aye.
Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washut. Western. Wharf. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 55 aye, 5 no.
House Bill 7, having received the majority vote of the members of the elected to the House, House Bill 7 has passed the House. Next bill for consideration is House Bill 19.
House Bill 19, sponsored by Transportation, Antique Motor Vehicles, an act relating to motor vehicles being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
House Bill 19, having been read three separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Clifford. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hunt. Jennings. Kenner.
Aye.
Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. McGuire. Martinez. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood,
Aye.
Simpson, Summers, Stiff, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yin, Zwanitzer, Mr. Speaker, Harshman. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Baker, aye to no. Further changes? McGuire? No to aye. Eklund, aye to no. Bear? Aye to no. McGuire? Aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Ottman? Aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 38 aye, 22 no.
House Bill 19, having been read House Bill, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 19 has passed the House. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 20.
House Bill 20, sponsored by Transportation, Driver's License Requirements, Visual Acuity, an act relating to motor vehicles, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
House Bill 20, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Clifford. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hunt. Jennings. Kenner.
Aye.
Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. McGuire. Martinez. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood.
Aye.
Simpson. Summers. Stiff. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Wharf. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Blackburn. Closing vote. Clausen. Closing vote. Vote is closed. 60 aye.
House Bill 20, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 20 has passed the House. So members, as you know, the chief clerk is looking up and down from her screen, looking out here. So she doesn't know if you're walking through the building, talking to your neighbor or what. If you're standing up, she's going to ask you if you're changing your vote or doing something else. So please, while we're doing third reading votes, if you're either be outside the room and make your vote and then stay down or leave the room so that the chief clerk doesn't have to pause for those things. All right, the next bill for our consideration, having been consideration, is House Bill 22.
House Bill 22, sponsored by Transportation, Wyoming Military Code, an act relating to defense forces and affairs, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We do have an amendment. Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move a third reading amendment to House Bill 22 and ask for your favorable consideration. This bill goes along with the second reading amendment to insert the term Wyoming, our name, before national. So it all reads Wyoming National Guard. And this was brought to me by some people who obviously read the bills. So I think that's a good point. We missed these on the second reading amendment. That's all it does. And I would ask for your favorable vote.
Any other member? I'm confident all of you have read the bills. Any other member want to comment on this amendment? Any other member? Seeing none, all those in favor of third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 22, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment has been adopted. House Bill 22. Okay, we're paused for a moment. There may be another amendment. All right, members, so there was a representative or a member of our body who thought there should have been an amendment available. It wasn't either. It's not in the system electronically, and certainly we don't have a physical copy of it either. So it didn't get approved. So that's another reminder. If you want your amendment, please get it approved prior to our readings. House Bill 22, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Clifford. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hunt. Jennings. Kinner.
Aye.
Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. McGuire. Martinez. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman.
Today, it's every 8 hours for that volume. And it's only been.
Ottman. Aye. Paxton. Provenza. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood.
No.
Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Worf. Williams. Wilson. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. Larson Lloyd. Aye to no. Henderson. Aye to no. Schwartz. Aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 39 aye, 21 no.
House Bill 22, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 22 has passed the House. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 23.
House Bill 23, sponsored by Transportation, Highway Safety Child Restraints, an act relating to child safety restraints being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
There is an amendment. Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would move House or third reading amendment to House Bill 23 and ask for your favorable consideration. Members, if you'll recall, we divided the amendment that I had on committee of the whole. Part of it passed, part of it didn't. Because part of it passed and the other portion didn't, it actually made the bill so that it would be confusing and probably not proceed forward, which actually I'm okay with, but in the interest of the body, I'll go ahead and bring this forward and ask for your favorable consideration. Thanks.
Thank you. Any member for their first time? Any member first time? Seeing none. All those in favor of third reading amendment number 1, House Bill 23, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. House Bill 23, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Clifford. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hunt. Jennings. Kinner.
Aye.
Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. McGuire. Martinez. Martinez. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood.
Aye.
Repeat, please, Sherwood.
Aye.
Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Walters. Washit. Western. Wharf. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Summers, will you confirm your vote for me, please? Closing vote. Are there any changes? Zwanitzer, aye to no. Nicholas, aye to no. Burt, aye to no. Henderson, aye to no. Larson Lloyd, aye to no. Hallinan, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote is closed. 26 aye, 34 no.
House Bill 23, having failed to receive an affirmative vote of the majority of the members elect to the House, House Bill 23 has failed to pass the House, is indefinitely postponed. Actually, that's not part of my script, Chief Clerk, but I think it should have been, shouldn't it? Now I'm making up my own script. It has failed the House. No doubt about that. Thank you, members. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 52.
House Bill 52, sponsored by Agriculture, Wyoming School Protein Enhancement Project, an act relating to school nutrition being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
House Bill 52 does have an amendment. Representative Sherwood, if you would move the amendment and then explain your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move amendment number 1 to House Bill 52 and ask for your favorable consideration. This amendment would allow the department to accept public donations or apply for grants in support of the school protein enhancement project. This does not require the department to accept, but may accept and then deposit into the account any gifts, contributions, donations, grants, or federal funds that would be designed to support this project. I believe this amendment gives the program room to grow based on future popularity or demand. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Representative Sherwood. And you don't know how well you got our attention because the volume in the room was plenty sufficient. So we thank you for that. Any member for their first time on the amendment? Chairman Eklund.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So this bill is a friendly bill to schools, our school districts, and our school children. This amendment is considered a friendly amendment. It makes a friendly bill even friendlier.
We like friendly. Any other member for their first time? Representative Sherwood, you want to take us home or are we good to go? All right, we're voting on third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 52. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment has been adopted. House Bill 52, having been read 3 separate times. The question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Clifford, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flittner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Hunt, Jennings, Kenner,
Aye.
Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, McGuire, Martinez, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood,
Aye.
Simpson, Summers, Stiff, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer, Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote is closed. 60 aye.
House Bill 52, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 52 has passed the House. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 57.
House Bill 57, sponsored by Representative Brown, advance enrollment, an act relating to K-12 student enrollment, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
House Bill 57, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass the House? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Clifford, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flittner, Fortner, Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Hunt, Jennings, Kenner,
Aye.
Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, McGuire, Martinez, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood,
Aye.
You need to hire now?
Simpson, Summers, Stiff,
It's just the people online.
Stivar.
They're high.
Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Okay, closing vote. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Blackburn? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 60 aye.
House Bill, we're getting a little touchy with our volumes now, so we're going to be a little cautious here. House Bill 57, having seen the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 57 has passed the House. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 64. And House Bill 64.
House Bill 64, sponsored by Representative Greer. Uniform Fraudulent Transfer Act, extinguishing claims. An act relating to Uniform Fraudulent Transfer Act, be it enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
Thank you. We do have an amendment. Representative Sherwood, and maybe step back from your mic just a little bit, just in case. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is that better?
Maybe another half a step.
Okay, I will try to speak very softly on my end.
Please proceed.
I move the third reading amendment to House Bill 64 and ask for your favorable consideration. The intent of this bill is to ensure that Wyoming has the best legal environment for business, and it will help bring money into the state as wealthier clients choose Wyoming as the jurisdiction for all their asset protection needs. Currently, with a longer look-back period, we are losing companies to Nevada because they are second best to us in their LLC laws, but ahead of us in their trust look-back laws. For your peace of mind, I will remind you that Wyoming requires anyone setting up a trust to sign an affidavit of solvency stating that they aren't trying to avoid creditors. They, the person or family creating the trust, must actively list the lawsuits and provide that they will have liquid assets or an umbrella policy to cover any potential losses from a lawsuit or a creditor. So I bring you this amendment on third reading on behalf of constituents and those who worked on the bill during the interim, and offer a compromise. This amendment adjusts the notice from originally posted 90 days to 120 days, which brings us in line with Utah's law. And I feel this is a reasonable compromise that still allows Wyoming to maintain a competitive advantage as a trust venue. Removing the notification requirements, as we did yesterday during second reading amendment, puts us almost back to square one. If we desire to diversify our economy, this is one of many tools that we can sharpen to enhance our finance and legal sectors. I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Representative Sherwood. Any member of their first time? Representative Stith.
Mr. Speaker, on and against this third reading amendment. So yesterday, I believe we adopted the amendment to delete this provision. Of course, what this amendment does is to reinstate the original bill and just change the date from 90 days to 120 days. And the justification being given for this provision is that it's going to enhance economic development. And I guess maybe it's worth having a discussion about that, because this economic development is in the form of making it more attractive for people to establish irrevocable trusts in Wyoming. I guess that's a good thing. Let's imagine it's really successful and we have more trust lawyers coming to our state. So in terms of economic development, what do we get out of that? With our current tax structure, we lawyers are kind of a drain on the government, okay? Because as a lawyer, on average, a lawyer will pay $3,000 in tax to all governmental entities in a year, and I'll send my children to school, and each of them will cost $16,000 a year to the state, right? So in terms of economic development, yes, is it good for the economy? Yes, but can we afford that kind of economic development? So I just don't think the economic development justification really works all that well here. What the bill does do in its current form is it does reduce the statute of limitations from 4 years to 2 years for fraudulent conveyances. I think that's fair enough. Creditors out there ought to be on the ball and not wait more than 2 years before they get their act together and pursue claims. So that I'm good with that. But what this bill would do is essentially reduce that statute of limitations down to 120 days, which really seems like a really short time period for a creditor to mobilize and understand they have a claim and find the right defendant and file their claim, et cetera. So on and against. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member for their first time? Step away from the microphone, Mr. Speaker. Any other member for their first time? Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does that sound okay?
Always you sound okay. Please proceed.
Always appreciate the good attorney and his comments, and he does bring a wisdom to his comments, and I respect him. Although I guess having returned to Wyoming after serving my country and endeavoring to become an attorney and working hard in the school and going to a small community and serving that community as an attorney and in many other capacities for 20 some years, I have a great deal of pride in the profession I just recently left. So I always have a tendency to need to defend that, and always nothing in my heart was but to do the very best thing for my clients. And anyway, so I do believe that economic development with this is not the strongest argument, although it is a good argument. We are trying to diversify our economy. We are trying to find ways to make Wyoming more than just dependent upon the minerals industry. And we start this one step at a time to do this. The comment that, yeah, I pay my 3,000 taxes and get 35, 36,000 benefit back, boom, he's absolutely right. We say that about any bit of economic development we want to do. We want to bring a gun manufacturer into a community, bring them in. Every person we bring in to work there causes a harder drain on our society. I mean, that's what, we've talked about our vision, vision, what we want to do in the future. We got to start thinking about that. How's that work? What's that really work? But in the meantime, okay, before we're all ready to answer that question, but in the meantime, what can we do? We can bring some laws that can help make Wyoming attractive for other businesses. We do this with the blockchain bills, and I know there are a lot of votes for some of the blockchain bills that are, I don't know what I'm, but we're all looking forward with that, trying to go in the right direction. These making our business laws in the state of Wyoming has been a longstanding endeavor for our state. We've done a great job. The trust laws, we're moving forward. And this one here is a little bit sensitive because I appreciate the comment saying that we're trying to reduce the statute of limitations by from 4 years down to 2 years, or it could be 120 days. The simple fact is you really have to go and read through the whole Fraudulent Transfers Act, which is a very difficult, convoluted, and cumbersome piece of legislation, because it doesn't tie in well with bankruptcy law, which is where we see it most of the time. Okay, it doesn't necessarily conflict, but it will with certain components in the banking world, because in the banking world, you'll have direct security interests, but you'll also have pledges on other assets. And so this creates a great deal of difficulty in how you interpret it. So what we're sitting here, what we're saying is that if we are trying to And this is what people do. They get a little older in life. Okay, you're an entrepreneur. You're somebody who's taking risk. You're out building your wealth. You're working, you're working, you're working. You get a little older and all of a sudden you say, you know what? I want to take some chips off the table. I don't want to have everything at risk. So I'm going to take some chips off the table. I'm going to set them up for my children. What we're doing here is finding a mechanism moving forward that says that you can do that with a certain amount of certainty, okay? So there's a look back period. If you do it for the wrong causes, 2 years to find that out. If you know that you have a creditor out there or a dispute with a business partner is probably a better example of that. You give a notice of it. You've got some certainty that you can move forward. Again, I said this when this came up. This is a policy decision. I personally have always had trouble with the Fraudulent Conveyances Act and thought what we had in Wyoming was onerous and actually stifled business on many levels. But with this, with respect to the trust, I appreciate the good member of Minerals bringing this for me. I've been a little bit under the weather. I've had a chance to argue it, and just that fact alone makes me feel better. So please support the amendment.
Thank you, Chairman. Any other members? Chairman Olson, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for the amendment. And I actually do want to speak a little more to the economic development aspect, because I think in most of it was in jest regarding lawyers, but the world of trusts is so much bigger than lawyers. And I can speak to this because this is actually all I do all day long when I'm not in the legislature, is deal with estate planning and trust laws. And two things here. One, I would consider myself probably in the minority in Wyoming, because lawyers aren't really the fish we're talking about. We're talking about companies, trust companies. So we're also talking about financial advisors. So the world is so much bigger than attorneys. What we're trying to attract is not more attorneys to the state of Wyoming. We're trying to attract these trust companies. The trust company is very unique because while the lawyer may set up the trust, which is what I do, on rare occasion, I will serve as the trustee of the trust. It's just a world that I don't have a lot of experience in, but that's what the trust company does. So even when I set up the trust, I'm working with a trust company, say, in Teton County, for example, and that company then takes charge of the assets. So there is a huge economic development aspect to it, actually, which I think shouldn't be dismissed. I think it's very important in the legislation. And I like the comparison of Nevada. I mean, you could go back to our LLC laws. We're trying to maintain competition and put ourselves out in the forefront. Blockchain was mentioned, all of these same things. Our trust laws in the same reality, where Wyoming is right on the cusp of being competitive with a lot of these states. And something like this and some other small changes, honestly, to our trust laws can put us over into an advantageous stage. I'll tell you right now, we're talking about a particular type of trust, the domestic asset protection trust, really. And these calls, here's the other part to the tax implication I want to bring up. I get these calls all day long from people all over the country who want to establish an asset protection trust in Wyoming. And I can only speak anecdotally to this, but in my experience, in the calls that I receive, most of these individuals purchase property in the state of Wyoming. They're not just using our laws, they actually purchase property. And so my calls come in mostly from other law firms in other states who they are planning with their clients. And they say, now my client's purchasing property. They will also set up companies and LLCs. So it's a big world. You're not just designing a trust and then saying, here you go, use our laws and these people reside outside of our state. They engage they have to have a residential trustee. That's what the law requires. So they absolutely have to have that trust company or that lawyer or someone serving as the distribution trustee in the state of Wyoming. Again, they purchase land, they set up companies. So there's a lot of flow through to the state of Wyoming. There's a lot to be said here that I would like to see more growth to. So on and for the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any other member for their first time? Any other member for their first time, third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 64? Member for their first time, member for their second time? Second time? Second time before the sponsor, Representative Sherwood, anything to add?
Mr. Speaker, for the comfort of your ears, I will not add any more.
Well, Representative Sherwood, we certainly do want to hear from you, and we've got someone here technically capable of adjusting it. So maybe go ahead and say a couple words so we can get a little more adjustment on our volume. That would be appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I feel like I'm on a radio show. Testing, testing. I appreciate the dialogue and the consideration. And as an economic developer, that is the lens in which I'm looking at this bill. And I see this as a way for us to be competitive and to not lose businesses to Nevada or even South Dakota who have similar trust statutes. I believe that this is a way to bring more money into the state. Yes, there are lawyers involved, but really, again, this is about the trust companies and those businesses that will then hire local CPAs and financial advisors, and they will domicile their LLCs in the state, which brings those LLC filings bring a net positive income to the state. So I ask you for your favorable consideration.
Thank you, Representative Sherwood. I think we have it adjusted now. I got thumbs up throughout the room, so we appreciate that. Members, we're voting on third reading, amendment number 1 to House Bill 64. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The chair is in doubt. All those in favor, please rise. Members, please stay standing and still so that we can get an accurate count. All right, those opposed? Thank you. Less than 36. The amendment has been adopted. House Bill 64, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
I'll let you go. Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Clifford. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hunt. Jennings. Kenner.
Aye.
Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. McGuire. Martinez. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Ottman. Aye. Paxton. Provenza. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood.
Aye.
Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stibar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Washit. Western. Worf. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. No. Zawannitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Haroldson? Clausen? Aye to no. Hallinan? Aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Ottman? Aye to no. Closing vote. The vote is closed. 39 aye, 21 no.
House Bill 64, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 64 has passed the House. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 68.
House Bill 68, sponsored by Representative Greer, Wyoming Statutory Foundation Act amendments, an act relating to the Wyoming Statutory Foundation Act being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
House Bill 68, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Clifford. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hunt. Jennings. Kenner.
Aye.
Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. McGuire. Martinez. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood.
Aye.
Simpson. Summers. Stiff. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Wharf. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zawannitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. Vote is closed. 60 aye.
House Bill 68, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of members elected to the House, House Bill 68 has passed the House. Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, would you come up here to the dais for a moment for me, please? The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 75.
House Bill 75, sponsored by Representative Gray, voter fraud prevention, an act relating to elections being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
Thank you very much. So members, we do have an amendment, and Representative Clifford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 75, and I will remove it at the appropriate time. Dos Nate'ena. Hello, my relatives. Hiseja na asitna. My Arapaho name is Coming Woman. Hinani e nina. I'm a Northern Arapaho. Ni itajana da anta na. I'm happy to see you all. Ni itajana da anta na. I am happy to be with you here today. I proudly come from a people, a generation of people who were here before Wyoming obtained statehood. I have a deep understanding of the power of elections and the power of voting. I also have knowledge and experience around the history of voter suppression and all the ways Wyoming has lived up to and failed to live up to our basic ideals and aspirations. If it wasn't for the landmark Voting Rights Act of 1965, which forbade racial discrimination in voting rights, I probably wouldn't be standing before this body here today. I worked as an advocate on the Wind River Reservation for a long, long time, trying to increase voter access and voter participation. I would tell my friends and families, if you don't vote, if you don't participate, systems will not include you. It's a matter of knocking down structural barriers. Your vote is your voice. I wholeheartedly believe that. And I believe when we get people civically engaged, it enables a more diverse pipeline of political balance, especially for people of color and those less fortunate. Friends, our state had a record-breaking voter turnout in the past election. Wyoming was not inundated with fraud, that it cheated any of our colleagues who no longer sit among us on this floor today out of victory. We who are in this chamber today have been duly elected to serve because our elections were secure. I think when you look at how our election structure works, we need to do everything in our power to encourage voting, especially with our young people, our new people, our people of color, and those less fortunate. The bill doesn't encourage that. We want more people to participate, not less. By passing this bill, it unequivocally equates to voter suppression and imposes a restriction on voting access. We need bills that ensure that voters choose their leaders, not the other way around. I would urge a no vote on this. Thank you.
Representative Clifford, did you move the bill? We were doing the exchange, but please move that. Yeah.
Move the bill?
Yeah. Move the amendment, excuse me.
I move third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 75.
Thank you. Just make sure we got things straight. Representative Zwanusser? Or Chairman
Thank you,
Zwanusser?
Mr. Chairman. Well, let me first establish, I think what we all know, that there is, let's say, an ideological political culture war going on around this issue, right? Currently at the federal level, there's efforts to expand in this area, and it states, many states, there are efforts right now to, be more specific on who is and who isn't allowed to register to vote, when, where, times, right? All that stuff going on, great. That doesn't deal with this bill. Let's talk specifically about House Bill 75, what it does and why it's before you. So the political science professor in me comes out, Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, right? All powers not delegated to the federal government are reserved to the states, which includes voting, as proven by the 10th Amendment. Voting and parameters is left to the state legislatures, right? Besides a couple, what you need a constitutional amendment, like to let 18-year-olds vote, it's up to us. So really the question before you in House Bill 75 today, and really the only question is, do you want the Secretary of State to list the acceptable forms of voter identification in rule and reg, or do you want them listed in statute as derived by the legislature? So the information is out there on who votes in Wyoming. 96% of people use a driver's license, either a Wyoming driver's license or a driver's license from another state to vote. 96%, that's covered. There's 4% of people left. Who are they? Well, start thinking of perhaps disenfranchised groups. They might be the elderly who might not have a driver's license, covered under the Medicaid card. They might be students who've lived here less than a couple of years. We've covered that. They might be people who don't have driver's license for some reason. We let them have a free identification card. That's still in the bill. I don't know who else is left that we're suppressing with this bill. The fundamental question before you right now is, do you want the legislature to set the parameters of who isn't allowed to vote, by what forms of identification, Or do you want the Secretary of State and Rule and Regulation to do that? I would say, me personally, I believe that it is this legislature, the 59 of us, who should be in fact setting the requirements, right? That's your job. That's what we get elected to do, is set the requirements on how voting works, how elections work in the state. I don't believe this suppresses anyone. I may have agreed with that before the second reading amendments, but the bill as it stands now, who are we suppressing? And if we are suppressing someone, we've taken care of it, right? They can still go and get a provisional ballot. You go in, you without one of these forms of ID. Not only that, we've actually listed big signage that say, hey, if you don't have an ID, there's going to be a problem. You can vote by provisional ballot. Your vote still counts. You have to go prove who you are within a day, a week, have somebody at home send you a photo of your ID to prove your identification. I don't think that's difficult. We've listed, you have a provisional ballot. We have some safeguards with your social security digit numbers on there to prove who you are. We have a database. So I'm not sure who we're disenfranchising with this bill. All we're truly doing, the bill in its current form, is saying, do you want the legislature to set the parameters, or do you want the Secretary of State? I think we, 60 of us, that's our job. So against the amendment, for the bill.
Thank you, Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm also against the amendment for the bill, and I think this is a good opportunity to talk a little bit about the work over decades on this bill. As the Chairman of Revenue talked about, former Speaker, this is a bill that's been worked on for over 20 years, and my brief moment working on it 3 years, I can tell you I've enjoyed every minute of it, and I think we are at the right moment for it. I want to talk a little bit about where we're at right now and the positive work that's been done. The county clerks, all of their amendments, what they wanted, their obstacles to being fine with this bill is passed. We passed those amendments. The student ID at the university and the community colleges, the license issue on second reading, we resolved that. Had good debate on it on first, second reading. And then when the bringer of the enacting clause amendment in Corporations Committee brought a concern about older tribal IDs being used because the newer one, there's been some struggles with adoption, and we passed that in committee through the Secretary of State. We supported that. So every effort has been made to work through this issue so that we don't disenfranchise anyone. And on top of that, then yesterday, the body passed an amendment waiving the fee for hardship. Some states have done that, but many have not. And we decided to do that. So again, we've done great work to make sure no one is disenfranchised. The Secretary of State supports this. The organization with 2 A's supports this, starts with 2 A's because of the work we've done. I've really enjoyed the dialogue with that organization, because previous forms of that bill, we disagreed on it, and we worked together to work through those issues. It's important that we continue to strengthen our election processes to ensure public confidence. And the more confidence people have, the more they will participate. And that's what we all want. And this is a best practices issue. So I encourage no vote on the amendment and an aye on the bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other member for their first time? Representative Provenza?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to members of the House. We are a body that comes here to Cheyenne. We move here. We live here for the legislative session to solve problems. We uproot our lives. We campaign hard. We talk with the people in our district, and we ask them what the problems are, and we come here to solve them. But as we've heard many times, we don't have a problem to go with this solution. We're also a state that prides itself on being different than the rest of the country. We're a state that prides ourselves on doing what's best for our communities and moving forward the Wyoming way. But without a problem to solve or a solution, a problem that doesn't exist, we're jumping on a bandwagon for no real reason. So I ask you today to vote against this bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Simpson, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we would all agree that our world has become very complicated. The good old way of doing things has unfortunately gone by the wayside in many regards. I want you to think about how many times you've been asked to show your identification in the last few months. Opening a bank account, buying cigarettes, boarding an airplane, and you can think of how many other times you've been asked to show your ID. This is standard practice in our society anymore. And to suggest that we could go to the polls and do something as very, very important as casting our vote, and to suggest we could just walk up and give our name and address and away we go. It just makes sense that we conform with the rest of the world in proving our identity. I don't know about you, my constituents are saying we are happy to put our identity out on the table for the privilege of voting. With the amendments yesterday, we've now made it so that there are hundreds of forms of ID, much to my chagrin. But we've certainly opened it up so that there is no one imaginable that could not take the opportunity to vote. I think that's very important for us. Ladies and gentlemen, I encourage you to pass the voter identification bill and vote in favor of House Bill 75. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Chairman Eklund, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I think all in all, we're more than likely here in this body trying to deal with a problem that is evident in other parts of the country and other states. And we can't deal with that. We found we couldn't. I would guess, I hear figures of close to half the country doesn't believe the election system was fair or done correctly. And that's gone on for 2 elections now. We can't do much about that. And we found that we're powerless to do any kind of investigation on other states, but we can do things with our own state. So in recent years, we've found that there has been little, if any, fraud, some accidents. The 2 gentlemen, father and son, named the same, and then there was another one. So I really trust our election officials, elected and volunteers. And I think they're really straightforward and honest, and I don't think there's a problem there. What I don't understand, and this hasn't been explained, there's been only one election that I've gone and voted at that I wasn't known by somebody in there. And somehow they tell me they know that I am what I say I am without pulling out an ID. I think that the ID just assures me that we're having a fair election. My constituents want this. The other times we voted for it, we would have eliminated a lot of senior citizens and it would have made a bigger mess, and because we didn't seem to have a mess. This one, I think, includes everybody. If it doesn't, it still crosses over to the other side. If somebody can come up with someone we left out, then we still have time to work on it to make it the perfect bill. But there isn't any reason why a person should be voting, should be left out. The ID system that we've set up, the exceptions we have, they seem to be good. So I'm against this amendment for the bill, and I'll quit speaking at that.
Thank you, Chairman Eklund. Representative Jennings, for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I'll be brief with it, against the amendment and strongly for the bill. So when one of the previous speakers said, what's the reason? Well, for me, the reason's very clear. I have constituents, and probably more than anything else currently, they want this. And it has been brought forward to the forefront by national questions. I get that. Are we solving fraudulent problems? I don't know about that. But I know this is a good bill. It's not for disenfranchising anyone. And there's my reason. I have a lot of people back home that are very interested in this. So on and for the bill, against the amendment.
Thank you. Any other member for their first time? Representative Wharf.
Mr. Speaker, speaking against the amendment for the bill, as I sat here, the one thing I just thought of is Wyoming has always been proud to be the leader, and where we may not be experiencing fraud, there's definitely been some consternation that maybe that was apparent in some other states. And I guess I just feel like I need to state, we've led the nation several times. Look at women's suffrage. That's something Wyoming's very proud of, and we should be proud of that. And I think this is a similar situation. I think we lead by example. We don't have a problem, I don't believe, in our state. That doesn't mean that it can't come here, but for the bill, against the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other member for the first time? Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Against the amendment for the bill, and a lot's changed, I think. First of all, as a kid in Wyoming, when I first voted, I was kind of surprised. I didn't need an ID when I voted. And I tell you, that's still the same. I work with young people and these 18-year-olds, that's the first thing I say, hey, you get a vote now. And I tell them how to register and go do that. And they all come back and they, geez, I didn't even need my driver's license. And I think people generally show up thinking they're going to. And then the other part of this, I've heard from election judges here recently, and they're saying, this is not going to be a problem. You're just going to lay down your ID and they're going to find your name and you know them anyway in most cases, and we're going to move on quickly. So I don't think any of that's a problem. And then finally, I think back to 2009, I told you about the whipping I took. At that time, the clerks, they were in force. And I don't see that now. And I'm not saying they're for it. I think they've been part of the solution and, told us the challenges to it. But boy, that deal, it's come a long ways. So I think we're in a good spot, and it's just part of this thing and making things better. So appreciate all the good work that's gone into this bill. So against the amendment for the bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any other member for their first time? Representative Romero Martinez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Real simple. I'm on and for this bill and against this amendment. Just a quick piece. In my area, voter suppression is real, but it's on the reverse side to the other party because I'm the minority in my district in terms of party. On and for the bill, against the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member for their first time? Any other member for their first time? To second time before the sponsor, to second time before the sponsor, to the sponsor, Representative Duncan, or Clifford, my apologies. Representative Clifford.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Friends, we are saying we need this bill, not because there was fraud in our elections, not because our electronic machines were compromised, not because our voter confidence was diminished. No, what we are saying is that we need this bill because of a hint of potential voter fraud. Because of that hint of potential voter fraud, we are now saying that we don't care if this bill disenfranchises voters. And we don't care if we increase barriers to voting. What this bill does is set bad voting policy. So the narrative of this bill making our equality state the gold standard, that you have to have an ID to be able to vote, is just one I'm not interested in moving forward. What this bill does is pose a real threat to our democracy. I don't want to be the first Northern Arapaho woman and the last to serve in this body. Ho, thank you. Thank you for your time, and Mr. Speaker, I withdraw my amendment.
Thank you very much. Members, House Bill 75, having been read three separate times. The question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Clifford. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hunt. Jennings. Kenner.
Aye.
Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. McGuire. Martinez. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood.
No.
Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Wharf. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Haroldson. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Blackburn, no to aye. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 51 aye, 9 no.
House Bill 75, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 75 has passed the House. Next bill for our consideration is House Bill 91.
House Bill 91, sponsored by Representative Duncan, removal of unenforceable property covenances, an act relating to real property and covenances, be it enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
House Bill 91, having been read three separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Clifford. Connolly. Crago. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flitner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hunt. Jennings. Kenner.
Aye.
Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. McGuire. Martinez. Nyman. Newsom. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood.
Aye.
Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Wharf. Wharf. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Yin. Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Wharf. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 57 aye, 2 no, 1 excused.
House Bill 91, having received affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 91 has passed the House. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House stand in recess until 2 p.m.
Members, I'm informed by our LSO director, there are still some folks that may want some bills to get pushed out. So if you do, I think you have 10 minutes to inform LSO that you are interested in those bills. Otherwise, they will be indefinitely postponed and not considered by the House. So committee announcements. Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 7, corporations, will meet as soon as we can get down there today to hear 5 bills in EO5, House Bill 14, right-of-way, House Bill 136, inclusive ballot language, House Bill 160, election ballot order, House Bill 12, bond elections, and House Bill 179, municipal tax elections.
Thank you, Chairman. Any other, Chairman Paxton?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 4, education, will meet in committee room 3 in 10 minutes to consider House Bill 173, school finance funding 2, House Bill 174, government sales and use tax, and if time allows, House Bill 61, school finance recalibration.
Thank you very much. Any other member? Chairman Burkhart and then Representative Larson. Dan. Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, will meet tomorrow, whatever the date is. It's Thursday, to consider House Bill 144 and House Bill 186.
Thank you very much. Representative Larson. Dan.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I just want to make an announcement for the House Republican Caucus. We'll plan on tomorrow night, or after adjournment, I guess I should say that, downstairs toward the auditorium. So tomorrow, there'll be elections at that time too.
Thank you very much. Any other business? Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your House Appropriations Committee will meet 10 minutes after the lunch hour to meet with our friends with TRW for the review of Senate File 56. And we will have an executive committee meeting this afternoon on adjournment.
Thank you very much. Chairman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to take a quick privilege as your majority whip, and debate's been really good, so I really appreciate that. I had some members come to me over the day about some of the debate, and maybe it's just getting used to some of the rules for some of our newer folks, but you know, a few times we've come to the mic and we've said this agency or that agency supports this or this agency supports that, and I just want to remind the members that we got to be careful in that area. The other branches of government are designed on neutrality and not supposed to take a firm position on our legislation. So if it doesn't mean that it doesn't, I suppose, happen at times, but when we're speaking on behalf of the agency and saying that, we may be stepping into a zone that we maybe don't want to be. So I just caution the members to be a little careful when we assume the position of any executive agency. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that reminder, both agencies and elected officials, whether they be statewide or otherwise. Any other announcements? Any other announcements? So members, when we return from lunch at 2 o'clock, based on the I think I had a motion from the majority floor leader, did I? Yeah, okay. We're going to take up our permanent adoption of our permanent rules. So if you have a rule that you want considered by the House, please get it approved. And so it's on the website. Right now I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rules. Now maybe there's 5 rules that have been proposed thus far. So if you have something you want to be considered, and they'll be taken up in the order that they are numbered. So we're just going to go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, based on what I have right now, upon reconvening at 2 o'clock. So with that, the House will stand in recess until 2 p.m.